role in medical care in this country. What we need to do is back off and encourage individuals, reward individuals for assuming responsibility for themselves. To start off, we should change the tax code. We shouldn't give tax benefits just to the people who work for big corporations. Everybody should get their tax benefit. My suggestion is this. Every penny that anybody ever spends on taking care of themselves medically would get a tax credit and take care of themselves and get out of the government business. But if you look at the debate on medical care, it seems like the motivation is mainly forcing and pushing everybody into the system. And they don't talk about voluntarism. They talk about, well, like the program that just came out of the Senate yesterday. He said, well, yes, you'll have a choice. If you don't want to join, you just have to pay a fine, $4,000, $5,000. And that is not a choice. That is obviously coercion. But forcing people into the system seems to be their notion. If you're 65 and over and you're on Medicare, you're not allowed to get your own medical savings account and opt out and take care of yourself. They want you in the system. And this idea that you have to buy insurance, and then you wonder why the insurance companies are not all much complaining. They're going to get a lot more customers. And they said, yes, they're even willing to take on people who have previous conditions. And that's rather strange, but if you read the bill, you find out there's no penalties if they don't. And but the whole idea of, what annoys me so much about this medical debate is the carelessness in using terms. They talk about insurance. But you know, once the government dictates something, once the government is involved, it's no longer insurance. It's a social welfare program that distorts the whole concept of measuring risk. Insurance should measure risk. What are the odds of you getting hit by a car or getting cancer? And you should be able to buy these policies. So we've interfered with that for so long. We've interfered with people getting into the medical field through the collusion between organized medicine and organized government. There was a time when we had a lot more medical schools in this country at the early part of the last century. Many of them were minority hospital or medical schools. But they say, oh, no, they're not doing a good enough job, and they closed them down, instead of encouraging them to improve them. So there's a limited amount of doctors that come into the field. We should have more doctors, and we should have less licensing. We should allow people their choices in medicine. We should let people, certainly be able to get their vitamins and nutritional substances without government regulations. I hope that we will continue this effort. I believe we will. I've been very encouraged in the last couple of years, mainly because we have discovered so many that were in the country thinking about these things and not just having a forum, and now that we do. And our numbers are much greater than I ever dreamed. But like I said a little earlier, I've been just so delighted on how the young people have responded. When we go to the campuses, they turn out by thousands, and they are interested, and they know what we're talking about. We're not, papering it over and making it sound like, yeah, everything's okay, but we're going to give you student loans. So we're talking about real freedom and getting the government out of our lives and off our backs, and letting people assume responsibility for themselves. There was once an old saying that said that, there's not enough darkness in the world to put out the light of one weak candle. And sometimes I think, and others have used this analogy, that we feel that way, that we're so small and there aren't very many of us, and how are we going to make an effort? But if you have a perfectly dark room but there's one candle, there's a fair amount of light and everybody can see it. And that's the way the freedom movement is. But that light is getting brighter and brighter. That light has not been put out. And Samuel Adams gave us some good advice. He said that it really doesn't take a majority. The majority is not necessary. The majority might have to come around to endorsing and not fight us and accept it. But what really changes the world, what really gives us a revolution, is a minority who's keen on stirring the fires of liberty in men's minds. That is what counts. The minority that has the knowledge and the effort has to play an important role. It is an educational effort. And I make the assumption everybody that's involved in the Campaign for Liberty are part of that irate minority who are determined to present this case. And we have such tremendous opportunities right now because of this disenchantment, this giving up of government. And that is going to grow and grow. So there's no reason in the world why our numbers won't grow even much faster. This should encourage all of us. One reason why I work hard for the promotion of liberty is because I believe personally that our goals in life ought to be to work on excellence and virtue. That should be our personal goals, to do the very best that we have with our talents. And it's very biblical, but it's good common sense. It's part of the freedom message. We should work to maximize our abilities and also to work for virtue. If you have unconcern about it, that's your problem, and government can't deal with it. But we have become a nation that assumes the role of promoting excellence and virtue and economic equality, and that is what we have endlessly. Endlessly, we have all these programs. We are going to tell you what you can eat and drink and what you can do with your life and how you can make your decision about your medical care and education, the whole works. But every time a government program is presenting to promote your betterment, they do that at your expense. They do that by undermining your liberty, and it makes it impossible. And so if we do care about excellence and virtue and improving our society and having greater prosperity and spreading the wealth more equitably than any other time, even though there will not be perfect equality, and that shouldn't be the goal, but if you want a maximum wealth society with the most amount of freedom, then we have to endorse this principle of individual liberty. And I do not like this notion that's been around now for 40 or 50 years, and when they talk about groups of people deserve their rights. You know, we have groups, we have minority rights and women's rights and gay rights and all of these things. But no, we should have individual rights. But we should recognize that every individual has his right to run his life as he pleases as long as he doesn't hurt somebody else. Freedom is popular for that reason, because it's not confrontational. It brings people together. So many people come together. Most people in this country understand that in our society that you're allowed to have your own religious beliefs. There's a bit of bigotry around. There's more and more today than there used to be. But basically, most Americans understand that you can be an atheist, or you can be a Catholic, you can be a Jew, you can be a Protestant, or whatever, and that's very good. But they don't take that and translate that into personal social behavior. Because some people, well, quite frankly, there are some religious beliefs that offend me, but as long as it doesn't affect me, I'm okay. But on social things, sometimes people take their social lives, and for instance, I don't particularly think it's a good idea to gamble, because you lose a lot of money, and it's not a good idea, and I don't personally endorse it, but I happen to be on a bill that legalizes internet gambling, because somebody out there might want to do it. And but the point being is that it does require some tolerance. Some people will do things that will offend you. Some people wear clothes you don't like. And but the alternative to use the government to come in and impose these rules, this is why we get into so much trouble in public places and public schools, is because you get in a dilemma. Who sets the standard? Who sets the decorum? Because it's the government. In a private school, you know, where there are very few drugs and very few problems, and they can have dress codes, and they seem to get along quite well, but they voluntarily go in. We go in under the conditions of those rules. They don't argue about textbooks. But what happens when the government comes in and takes over? Who's the decider? Well, we had a decider, but he's not here now. Who's going to decide which books to have, and what should they be taught about evolution and different things like that? See, all those problems become more complex. The complexity comes because the government's involved. I mean, we have to do our best to work with the system, and I grew up in public school education, but it was the control of the school was never passed